My name is Cinda Lasanto, and I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction at North Rose Wolcott Central School District. My job is to inform staff and parents and the general public about the reforms in education and instruction. And I've noticed that lately there's been a lot of confusion around the terminology involved in the initiatives that New York State has put forth to revamp our educational system. And so I want to take a little bit of time to give a factual overview of the story of the Regents reform agenda and what the Common Core is and what the Common Core isn't. So I'll start with the Regents reform agenda. The Regents refers to the Board of Regents who are it's the governing body in charge of education in New York State. Looking at the data of how our students are doing in a global market and across the state and across our nation, they realized that we were not expecting enough of our students. They were not able to compete in a global economy. And so they decided that we needed to reform our educational system in New York State, thus the name Regents Reform Agenda. The next step was, well, where do we get the money to fund all the changes that need to be made? And so they applied for the Race to the Top grant. The Race to the Top is a term you've probably heard, and that is simply the name of the federal grant that funds the reforms that the state has decided that they will tackle. New York State did not win the first round of the grants, but they did win the second round, and they were awarded $700 million to use to fund these reforms. In these reforms, there are many separate initiatives. The first and most important one is the Common Core standards. That's the term that most people are familiar with, and that's the term that is probably most misunderstood. The Common Core state standards are simply expectations. There are a set of expectations for each grade level, pre-kindergarten through 12th grade, in ELA, English Language Arts, and math. They're what we expect students to be able to do by the end of those grade levels. And I'd like to just read a couple of examples of them. In kindergarten, with reading and support, ask and answer questions about key details in a text. That's not that unusual to expect a kindergartner to be able to do that. In grade 5, quote accurately from a text when explaining what the text says. It just means go back into the text and say, I believe this because the author said this. Grade 8, cite the textual evidence that most strongly supports an analysis of what the text says. And in grades 11 through 12, the same as grade 8 with the added, including determining where the text leaves matters uncertain. These are things that we would expect students of those grade levels to be able to do. And in math, kindergarten, represent addition and subtraction with objects, fingers, mental images, and drawings. In grade 3, represent and solve problems involving multiplication and division. Grade 6, apply and extend previous understandings of multiplication and division to divide fractions by fractions. 6th grade, you would expect them to be able to do that. And in 9th grade, interpret parts of an expression such as terms, factors, and coefficients. These are the Common Core standards. They're just expectations, what we expect students to be able to do. Two terms around the standards are Common Core state standards, which are those set of expectations that are exactly the same for all 47 states that have adopted the Common Core standards. Each state was then given the option to add more detail to the standards in areas that they thought things were missing. And so New York State added some. They're allowed to add 15%. New York State added some things to the standards, and those are called the Common Core learning standards. So the Common Core state standards are exactly the same for the 47 states that adopted them. The Common Core learning standards are the set of standards that New York State follows. Another one of the initiatives is the New York State curriculum modules. You might have heard of the modules, and these are simply sets of units of learning. They're what teachers create throughout the year as they create their lesson plans or their unit plans. It's what they will teach and how they will teach it. The New York State curriculum modules are optional. Districts may use them. They don't need to use them. They may adopt them. That's another term you may have heard. To adopt them means to use them just as they were written. To adapt them means that you use what you feel is pertinent to your students, or what is written in a way that is more rigorous or superior to a unit that you have used in your classroom. At North Rose Wolcott, we have adapted the modules. Teachers may use them and lay them side by side next to the curriculum that they have taught, and make the judgment of which one addresses the standards better for their students. So the modules are units of study that are aligned to these standards, how you will deliver those standards so students will be able to do those things by the end of the year. Another initiative under the Regents Reform Agenda is the Annual Professional Performance Review, or the APPR as it's known, and that is a teacher evaluation system. It's composed of three parts. One is classroom professional performance, and that means how the teacher delivers instruction and deals with students, and that involves teacher observations done by supervisors or administrators. Another part is local testing, and that's assessments that have been created or purchased to use on a regular basis throughout the year. The third part is growth data, and that means how much your students have grown, how much growth they've made in ELA or math throughout the year. Those three parts are put together to form a teacher performance score. Another initiative is are the standardized tests for grades 3 through 8, ELA, again, English Language Arts, and math. Those are federal tests. Ever since we've been under the No Child Left Behind legislation, we have administered ELA and math tests to students in grades 3 through 8. These are not new, but they have changed. They're more rigorous. The reading passages are probably longer. The questions are a little bit more difficult or more abstract, and they cause students to think harder, but they are not new tests. They are also not longer than they were before. They've always been 3 days in most grade levels. And a major difference of these tests are that they are aligned to the Common Core standards that have been adopted. So that makes them a little bit different, but they are not new. Another initiative is data-driven instruction, and that means using the test scores and the data, the information, the results that we get from these tests, and using that information to inform what we do next with students. So depending on how well they perform on a test, that would change what you do to teach or reteach afterward. The last initiative is the National Student Database. The National Student Database aggregates or gathers all of this information that we have on students and puts it in one place where teachers and parents can access it. And as you know, we have a mobile population. As students move from one district to another or one state to another, we can access that data on those students. So the purpose of this video has been very simple: to clear up the confusion about what the Common Core is and is not, and what the Regents Reform Agenda is and is not. If it's done that for you, please share this with your family and friends.